Hello there, and welcome to another Gear Talk. We do this every other Thursday at 5 p.m. here on BCast Gaming. I'd like to welcome you all as we take a deep dive into the mind of Chairman Richard Prescott and decide whether or not this gentleman is or is not an evil, dubious bastard. Alrighty, so now that that's out of the way, I couldn't think of a better skit for it. I didn't want to dress fancy for it. We're doing the Gabe's Convoy discussion series, and Prescott does play a role in things. He is involved, he knows about all this, he sets it all up so they go out and go after Ukon. But the thing you have to think about is, was he evil for what he did? So, like, just in general, like, not even for what he did with the convoy, but just in general as a human being. Was he evil? Was he an antagonist to, like, the main story at all? Like, it really got me thinking, like, do I do a Prescott video altogether? I don't think so. I think I can save that for when I do a COG discussion series and talk about the COG in general. I think that would be a better place. For instance, when I did the Hive Busters, I threw in Hoffman, because Hoffman is leading all of it. He is involved in all of it. It's not like he's doing other things on the side. That's what he's doing where we are in the story. It makes sense to throw Hoffman in. Prescott is giving this mission out and dealing with like 50 other things still. So I didn't think it was right, but I felt we at least bring Prescott up at least because he is involved in this. So I just want to talk about, like, over all the things he did, if he was an evil, dubious bastard in general, because there were a lot of things I knew that he did, but until I made a list of everything he actually did that was, like, bad or, like, on the darker side of things, this is a larger list than I thought it was. So, we're just going to dissect everything here and kind of just go over, like, pretty much come to the conclusion, was he bad for what he did, or did he have, like, a genuine reason for the things he did throughout the entire story? Now, the list I have is going in an order of kind of like chronological. I didn't just throw everything up randomly because some things lead into another thing. So, for instance, like, we're going to talk about New Hope. That comes up into other things like the data disk he had that had information about, like, Azura. Those two things, for instance, are like things that are passed down from chairman to chairman. So it's not like, oh, you know, he just learned about New Hope and kept it quiet like 10 years into the war. No. Like, when he became chairman, a lot of these secrets were given to him, and he was to keep them secret. So I'm just going to go down the events of things we have here. Some of them are major things, some of them are minor things, but they are still, like, negative things. I didn't put good things on here because I don't think we should judge him by just, like, good, bad, good, bad. Let's look at all the bad things and see if he had a reason. So starting off, I have military fraud. Now, you might be wondering, what do you mean by this? It is stated openly that he did serve the COG. He was a soldier. But there is a discrepancy that comes up, and it is brought up in the background of the story. There is an insinuation. It is seen that, like, he definitely had some fraud for what he currently has on his record. For instance, when he served, I believe he served for a year to a year and a half, and it is stated he never once saw combat. He was a trained gear, but he mostly stayed behind, and he was, like, working books or working in the offices. He was never on the front lines. And we see in Gears of War 2, when he is speaking to the crowd, he's giving his famous speech that we all know. He has 4 medals that are on his chest. And a lot of people in the story at least bring up, like, how could he have those medals if he did not serve? And it is a very good point to bring up. I did a little bit of digging myself to see if I could find any information. I will state right now, for the record, there is some fraud involved here, but at least I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I came across 2 medals, at least in our world, that have existed at least, that you can receive for not being on the front lines or fighting. And the 2 of them I have are the Good Conduct Medal. Now, this one I believe is given if you serve a year and it's seen that, like, you're in good standings or, like, you're doing a very good job for what you're doing. You can receive a medal for this, the Good Conduct Medal. The second one I found was the National Defense Service Medal. Now, this one is, it's given to, like, during a time of war or, like, a time of urgency for the nation. And this one, I believe, was made up, I can't remember the exact day, I believe in the 60s. At least in our world, it was made for, like, if you serve, just in general, you receive this medal if it's during, like, a national emergency kind of, like, situation. He was serving during the Pendulum Wars. So you could see this as, like, a national kind of urgency kind of thing involving Emulsion, fighting the UIR. So I could see it as he received this medal during that because he served in general. Good Conduct, that's 2. Now, it doesn't explain all all 4 of them, and these are just stuff in our world I'm talking about, so I'm going to assume with the assumptions that are brought up in the game, he definitely got military fraud. Now, I'm assuming he did this so that when he was chairman, he at least has some decorations to show, so it's not everyone seeing as like this greenhorn was just chucked in and he doesn't know what he's doing. So I'm going to chalk that up, and how I'm going to rank these are just bad and neutral. There is no good. All this stuff is bad stuff. You can't really just justify it by saying it was a good thing he did bad stuff. It's either bad or neutral. Neutral being like, okay, there was a reason for it. It was like either a justified reason or there wasn't another choice. This was done because the decision had to be made. Bad is just he did it because he was bad. So I put this one down under kind of both, a bad and neutral, because I understand why he would do it. He's doing it to show, like, okay, understand that I have experience. But it is also still bad because you're going against the system. You're faking out your medals. Like, this is a time when the previous chairman had just died and you are cast in. Everyone understands you're a greenhorn. There's really no need to do it. So I'm going to put it kind of in a middle range just to say bad and neutral at the same time. Next up, we have the New Hope situation, or just the secret in general of New Hope existing. Now, when the previous chairman had died, and I keep wanting to say Hoffman. Hoffman comes up later on in leadership, but when Prescott is put in charge, all the secrets that the chairman have from one to another, they are always divulged with each one that comes through. So Prescott is given all this information, and he's like, you know, New Hope is a thing. Here's what they were doing at New Hope. It did not mean he knew that the locusts were born there, but he did know that, like, the origins of what was to come happened there. The scientists went to Kadar, they couldn't find them, and he knows, like, something involving the locusts involved New Hope. Now, obviously, he doesn't know, like, yes, that's right, New Hope is where the locusts were made, it's all our fault. Maybe he did. Maybe, like, it was just straight up, like, there's a note that, like, the previous chairmans leave to each other, just, like, a sticky note of, like, heads up, our bad, we did it. You know, maybe something like that. But yes, he did know about New Hope, and he did everything in his power to make sure no one ever learned about New Hope. I put this one under neutral because I understand why he did it. Like, this is a big situation. Like, yes, so our scientists were creating creatures when we were trying to cure rust lung. The possible origins of the locusts, we learn later on, that is the origin. And all of this stuff goes down. Where Mira was, I'm going to get so many names mixed up here. Where Mira was, and that's where she ended up being sent over to Kadar. Like, all of this happened. We don't need the mass populace knowing this. This is something we can, like, keep to the higher ups at least. Most people don't need to know. Because it is brought up in different areas of the story in the books, for instance, that there's a lot of secrets. If the public gets a hold of this, it's just general discourse and anarchy. If some of the not so high up members of the COG got a hold of this, general anarchy and everyone's going nuts. Chain of commands are going to get broken easily. That's what he worried about with Hoffman for something. So, neutral, I can understand why he did it to kind of keep the peace. But also it's one of those things where it's like, you're going to have to tell someone sooner or later about the origin of the locusts. Like, you can't just cover that up for too long. Next up, we have Azura. When he became chairman, he learned that Azura existed. It was already being built during the Pendulum Wars. It was already a thing. So when he came into power, Azura, it's kind of like, here you go, Azura exists. The thing about this one is that he was taking the higher level COG military forces, like the Onyx Guard. He was taking the higher ups, like the heads of the military. He was bringing heads of the government. He was bringing all the best scientists to Azura and kept it a complete secret. No one knew what happened to these people. People thought people were dying left and right. They weren't. They were being shipped off to Azura where they were working on a way to end the war. Now, when this happened, it's one of those things where it's like, I get why you did it, but you're also taking our best and brightest away from, like, the problem. Now, in Prescott's mind, it was like, we'll take the best and we'll figure something out where they aren't going to die. But it's also like, you're leaving everyone over here high and dry where they're going to die. And that was the biggest problem, is that the reason the war ended, the reason everything got taken care of, is because of Adam's machine on Azura. Like, think about that. Literally, if he wouldn't have taken them to Azura, the war wouldn't have ended. But at the same time, if he left them where they were, like, they could have died. It's just a big thing where it's like, and you'll notice a lot of this, Prescott's doing, like, the hard decision making, and whether it's good or not, someone has to do it. He decided to do this. It ended up working in the end, technically, but it's also like, you're making a lot of decisions that are affecting each person on each side. Like, there were scientists eating filet mignon on the island, while you had basic people living on the streets eating rats. Like, you can see where kind of the divide is, and Prescott was like, well, this has to happen. But it's also like, can't you just move some of the food back over to Jacinto or something? Like, come on. Like, I put it as neutral. I think it just makes sense because it's like, yes, it was a thing that needed to happen, but you didn't have to put it that extravagant for everybody. Next up, I have him marked down as a skilled liar. Now, this one really isn't like something he did, but what he does constantly. It's mentioned in the books a lot of times. He very much picks and chooses his words. Every sentence he makes. He is very knowledgeable of what he's saying with every word. So if there is something he wants someone to hear or believe, he knows what to say. When it comes to deceiving someone, he knows what he needs to say. He's very, very, very good at this. The books stress it immensely when it goes into his chapters. He has chosen every single word to fit what he is trying to convey. And I have this as straight up neutral. I don't see this as being like an evil thing. He's taking all of this, how it needs to be conveyed and spoken about. Like, he can't tell anyone about Azura. So he's just like, oh yes, like, you know, maybe there are places out on the islands we could find, but, you know, we would have to go looking to see what we could do about. Like, things like that. He's not lying about Azura. He's stating, like, yeah, Azura could exist. We just, you know, we'd have to go find it. When he very much knows where it is. Like, he picks his words very carefully. And I don't see this as really a negative thing. Well, lying is a negative in general. But it's one of those things where it's like he is keeping the peace and getting his word across in the best possible way. Next up, I have the Hammer of Dawn Strikes. And I don't care how you splice it. I don't care the reasoning. This was a big bad thing. This was a no-no. This was evil. This was horrible. So the Hammer of Dawn strikes a year into the war. I believe it's stated within a few months of his, like, leadership as the chairman. Prescott decides, we gotta nuke the planet. We gotta take these orbital lasers and just strategically hit everywhere on the planet. And they do it. Like, there's no getting around that. Prescott straight up kills millions and millions and millions. And he doesn't do it like he wants to. Like, yeah, we'll do this. Like, there's a reason. He does it because the locusts are invading. It's stated within months they're going to take over and kill us all. Humanity's wiped out and the locusts win. You know, they keep on getting our resources from us by going through our towns and scavenging. Like, it's very clear, like, something's got to be done. And he has to make the hard decision to do it. So he decides, we're going to have to do it, no matter what people think. You got 3 days, good luck. And, you know, I understand. And the books painted extremely well his feelings. He even asks for mercy at times in his own head, just like, before he hits the button. He's like, there's no forgiveness for what I'm about to do. So, like, may God have mercy on my soul, pretty much, for what I'm about to do. Like, he spends so much time waiting for someone to come up with a better plan, but no one has any better ideas, and he has to do it. So, I get why he did it. I understand the reasoning, his thought process, his decision-making, but it's still a bad thing. You still killed so many people. Like, you can't shake that. There's, like, a lot of people hate him in the story. They have very good reason to hate him. You know, and he understands that. He doesn't try and, like, you know, weasel his way out or make excuses. He's like, yeah, like, decisions had to be made. I did it. What are you going to do? And honestly, like, kudos to him. He owns it. So, yeah. Kind of an evil thing he did there. Next up, I have the attempted murder of Sid and Gabe. Now, this one, I just put him down as bad. This was a big no-no. This was a mean thing he did. This was evil. So after, you know, they get through, Gabe does and tells Prescott about, like, hey, you know, Sid's telling us a bunch of this stuff, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, New Hope, what's that? Prescott is very much like, you're going to need to take care of him. Like, he's obviously speaking gibberish, something. Just take care of him. Blah, 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 blah. They poke in further, learn about it, get the files, all of that. And that's when Prescott's like, I thought I told you to take care of this. You didn't take care of it. I'm going to come and have us pick him up. Gabe's not an idiot. He understands, like, okay, I'm going to give you fake coordinates because, you know, by the time you come here to pick up Sid, we're going to be long gone. We're going rogue at this point. And the moment they walk out, there's a plateau in the plateau in the distance that Gabe points over to Michaela, like, I send him coordinates for there. By the time they get there, we're already going to be gone. And when he says that, a hammer of dawn strike comes down, obliterates a side of the entire plateau, and that's when you realize, like, Prescott was just going to kill all of you. I put it as bad because, yeah, that's kind of an evil thing. You're already on a covert mission that's under the books, like, under everything, under the table, under the goddamn concrete. You're pretty much, like, entitled to, like, secrets at that point. Like, Prescott really has nothing to hide. At that point, he'd be like, yeah, you're already doing secret missions. Let's just tell you some secret info if you want. At that point, like, I would understand that. I get why he's holding the secrets, but no, like, openly just killing off everybody just because one person might be spouting gibberish, kind of an evil move. Next up, we have the Fortification Act. So, for all of you who don't know what the Fortification Act is, after the Hammer of Dawn strikes came down and took out a large chunk of the population, it was decided, hey, we're going to need to keep order somehow. So, what did we do? We went out and we set up the Fortification Act. Well, Prescott did. What the Fortification Act is pretty much full-on martial law. Whatever the chairman, higher-ups, anyone says, goes. Period. Curfews, that's in effect. Limited to what the citizens can have, that's in effect. What else? Issue things to individuals in general, boom. You want to join the COG? Join it, you're with us. If you're not, well, good luck being on your own as a citizen. You ain't getting as much as the soldiers are. All of that stuff. I put this down, honestly, as pretty much like a neutral thing. Like, I understand why he did that. At that point, after what he did, there's going to be chaos. They need to mark down in the ground, this is how things are going to go. So, honestly, I see it as a neutral thing. I understand why he did it. I think it makes complete sense. And, yeah, Fortification Act, I think it's fine. Neutral, moving on. Next up, we have the birthing farms. Not gonna lie, that's just messed up and horrible. It's an evil thing off the bat. So the birthing farms, as you can probably guess, is where the women were sent to be involuntarily coerced into having children. Already horrible, but because of the Fortification Act in place, what else could happen is you're a woman who is able to give birth and you're not serving the COG, birthing camp. You are a woman that's about to come into their first cycle of being able to reproduce. We're pumping you full of drugs, birthing camp. Oh, you're at the birthing camp and you can't give birth anymore? You're unable, you're in their terms, barren? Guess what? You're fighting in the military now. No question. And it was messed up. Like, the thought process that Prescott had was, okay, if this war is going to go on for a very long time, we're going to have to pump out some new soldiers. So, we're going to take our best and brightest and greatest soldiers, send them to a birthing camp, have their pick of the litter, and they're going to be able to have their offspring grow up and fight in the war also. That was the thought process. First off, after the Hammer of Dawn strikes, before that I should say, we thought we were going to lose in 2 months. After, we didn't know what was going to happen with the war. We just thought we'd have a chance at defenses. You're already going through, and this wasn't even like we need to rebuild humanity through this point. No, that was Azura's point. Best and brightest minds rebuilding from there and taking care of the war. That was Azura. The birthing camps were literally, we need more soldiers. That was it. Not only that, but like underage, bringing them in just to pump them full of like drugs to get them preemptively going. Messed up. Big evil. Like, there's no defending it. I can't, like, there's understanding why he did it and then like accepting it. No, like, you did it. Like, that was horrible. Your thought process was that this war would go on for like decades and decades and decades, like the Pendulum Wars. With how bloody this war already was, the fact we made it to 17 AE is impressive. I should say that first off. So, evil. Just horrendous what he did. Next on the list, we have abducting Adam Fenix. Now, for a lot of people who don't know, because of the books and everything that are brought up, it's heavily brought up a lot in the books. Adam knew all about Mira and the Locusts. He knew all of it. He was in contact with them. A lot of things fell through. He wasn't able to find a cure for them. It's a long story. He had contact with them. They asked him for a cure. He couldn't make it like his wife could. He ran out of time. The Locusts invaded. That's what happened. So, when all that's going on, sooner or later, he tells his friend Neville, hey, I'm so guilt-ridden about this. Guess what? I know about the Locusts and Mira. Neville goes ahead and tells Prescott. Prescott is legitimately ticked off about this. And during an encounter where the Locusts are going to come and pick up Adam, because Adam is like, I will help you. They're going to come and take him. Marcus is coming to come. It's a long, crazy, convoluted story. Also, a lot of people die, and this is why Marcus went to prison. Marcus goes in and is like, I'm going to save you, Dad. So he's fighting his way through. The locusts are trying to get to him. All of this is happening. The entire building pretty much gets on one port demolished, and Adam is buried under rubble. Like, he's almost dead. Everyone's gone, and this is the point where, like, Prescott sends in his boys, Onyx Guard and everything, take him when he's still barely alive, get him over to Azura, patch him up, and it's like, you're forced to stay here now. Like, and they have the not even heart to heart, pretty much just fist to fist almost, of just like, why would you not tell anyone about Mira? And Adam's just like, well, because it's my stupid fault, I'm guilt-ridden. I'm really summing up a lot of this, but understand, like, there's an entire book talking about this. So he pretty much takes Adam against his will to be on Azura. I don't really see this as a bad thing. It is bad, but like evil, it's neutral. Adam knew about the locusts. He was already looking for a cure for Lambency and how to take care of it. It makes sense that you'd bring him to Azura. I don't see anything, like, negatively evil about it. I see it as negative neutral of, like, I get it. Like, you had to bring someone in who's, like, the specialist. There you go. The best weapons tech person you got, we're going to make him into a chemist now. So I just put it as neutral. I could see reasoning for it. Next up, we have sinking JACINTO. Like, it sounds horrible. That's the thing. Like, it sounds really bad. But it's neutral. Like, there was a very good reasoning for it. Even Prescott wasn't really on board for this decision at first. But I mean, like, Marcus comes back up and says, like, they plan on sinking JACINTO, but if we sink it first, we'll preemptively sink them, and then they're going to get drowned out. And everyone's like, that's nuts, until, like, they actually sit down and think about it, see the forces coming, and they're like, you know, it kind of makes sense. Like, this, no, let's do it. Now, don't forget, they sunk an entire city. Like, their capital got sunk. Like, people died. A lot of people probably died. Like, they evacuated as much as they could. People most certainly died. Okay, unlike the hammer strikes, like, this isn't, like, a planet-level thing. Alright, it's still bad. It's still not a good thing. But I put it down as neutral. Because it was like a coordinated effort between like everyone that was in charge. You know, everyone was kind of on board with it, understanding what they were going to do. And they weren't really left with a lot of option. If they didn't do it, the Locusts would do it to them and they're going to die. So I put it as neutral. There wasn't really a lot of like leeway for arguing yay or nay. It was kind of like we don't really have a choice. So neutral, I guess, technically you get a pass on this one, Prescott. Next up, we have A2897. If you don't know what that is the data disk that was carried around everywhere by Prescott that held all the information on Azura. This is the thing that, like, ways to get in, ways to get out, ways around the Maelstrom, where it is. Everything was on here. Every single bit of information involving Azura was on this one data disk, and he kept it next to him as much as he possibly could. This was the thing that caused a lot of friction between him and Hoffman. They went back and forth constantly trying to get the secrets figured out. Like, Hoffman wanted to know the secrets. Prescott wasn't saying them. This data disk, Hoffman was able to steal at one point, and really it just got to the point where Hoffman didn't trust him anymore. He did not care he was stealing the disk anymore, so he did it. And Hoffman is really just like, you know, if you want this back, you got to tell me, like, all the rest of the secrets that are going on, like, lay everything flat, and I'll tell you what I know about the disc I have now. This kind of, basically that told, like, Prescott, like, you don't know what's on the disc, so he wasn't worried. He's just like, well, he obviously didn't crack it, so why do I care what you're trying to figure, like, get out of me, because you have no leverage. You have my disc? Well, if you can't get into it, what are you going to do with it? So, yeah, up yours. Basically, that's how it went. So yeah, it held all the information. He never told a single soul what was on the disc. I put this one down as neutral. In a very, very basic setting of understanding, this is Prescott's property. He did not tell anyone about anything on it. He was not trying to entice anybody, and his property was stolen from him. So technically, even though that held a lot of secrets for getting everyone left to Azura, technically it's neutral because, you know, you'd have to put Azura as just bad in general because this fits into it, but it's like his stuff was stolen from him. He never told anyone what was on. It could have literally been his hidden sex tape that he had with, like, I don't know, pick anything you want out of the list. Could have been anything. I don't know. It's neutral. I really had a hard time trying to find anything evil about this one. Alrighty, now we have hiding Lambency. This was something that he also did. When Lambency was a thing, he already knew about it. Him, Adam, and a lot of other people in Azura fully 100% knew. While people were discovering it over on the mainland, full knowledge. Everything they needed to know, they already did. Now, when I say full knowledge, I mean like there's something going on with emulsion causing Lambency. It's not like he knew the in-depth in and outs of it. They were still discovering things over on Azura, but this is stuff they wouldn't have learned on the mainland for years and years and years. So he was collecting samples, getting everything and bringing it back to Azura. He openly just did not tell people about like the main big bad thing about Lambency, how bad it could get. He was in the knowledge of how horrible it could become, and it was happening before his eyes. I put this one as bad. Like, you could have given a heads up to somebody. Like, oh, hey, it seems like this could be really not good. These are my thoughts on it. Hey, I've been looking at, I don't know, like, you're a silver-tongued bastard. Pick your ways of how you're gonna finagle your way into a conversation about it. Like, you had to have had a way to have let people know. Left a document somewhere or something. Like, you didn't say a single thing. You openly, not openly, he didn't tell anybody, but on Azura he openly knew. But on the mainland, you knew. You fully knew, and you didn't say a single thing. I put it as bad. That's kind of a nasty no-no he did. Finally on here, I have leaving the cog. Now, when things got really bad on the mainland, when it was a situation where, like, the civilians were upset, the main leadership was upset, Trescue was involved at this point, Michelson, Hoffman, all three of them were having issues involving Prescott. It came down to the point where they're like, let's hold an election and decide who's in charge. Prescott wasn't really all for that. Prescott was really like, we need to keep order and stability, and everyone was like, we need to change it. No one trusts you, Prescott. And this is when Prescott was kind of like, and there is a lot more in depth in Coalition's end on how this goes down. A lot of events that lead up to it, and I'm very much going to simplify it. Bear with me. Again, there are books among books that go over this stuff. I'm not going to have time to go over all of it. But he basically says, you don't like the way I'm running things? You think you can do a better job? There you go. It's yours. I'm out, ski. Deuces, and he just leaves. Pretty much it comes down to Trescue, Michelson, and Hoffman are leading a three-way leadership of the COG. That's what's left. And once Prescott leaves, he makes his way back to Azura. They have a way of getting him there so that he's not found out. There's a sub that follows, but they don't find him. And he gets back there and he spends the rest of his time, before he returns with a message for Marcus, he spends the rest of his time, well, first he goes for Michelson, then Marcus. He spends the rest of his time on Azura. Now, the reason this is such a bad thing is not only is your leader leaving, but this basically destroys the COG. Like, even with Trescue, Michelson, and Hoffman in charge, they can't do anything to keep everything under control that well, and everything falls apart. The COG is disbanded. Basically because Prescott left. I had such a toss-up with this one, but I mostly put it as bad because of the fact that, understand, he was over on Azura. Very rarely was he on Azura before he openly left the COG. Like, he would spend, like, maybe at most half a day on Azura, and then he would leave, come back to the mainland, and be there for, like, months and months and months at a time, go back to Azura for, like, a day and a half, go back for months and months, maybe even, like, a 6-month period, and this happened for, like, 15 years. He was doing this. And it's like, he wanted to be with the people. They needed a symbol of leadership, and he understood that's me. I have to be here. He wasn't trying to, like, get his way out of there and be like, well, if I pretend I die, I can go over to Azura. No, he's like, I'm the leader. I'm in charge. I have to be the one that is here for my people. Which is commendable, but at the same time, when you left, all of that was destroyed. Like, I get that, like, the leadership issue is happening and everything, but you had to have had an idea of how to fix this. You had to have had some way of making it work. Like, you just left. And you went back to Azura, and granted, at the time, it's like, Azura needs me more now. Like, we need to get this thing, this machine of atoms done. Like, we need to have all of this finished. Like, we don't have time anymore. Lambency has hit an all-time, oh, hell no. I get that. But it's like, you couldn't find a way to, like, blend both worlds at this point. Like, I know you were already kind of doing it, but they needed you. Their leader had deserted them. Their government is gone. The COG is mainly based on a government functioning perfectly well. The coalition of ordered governments. It is very heavily government. You abolished that by leaving. The government in general is in disarray because their people don't know how to operate without the government in charge. The civilians are... I hate to say it because it sounds horrible, but the COG civilians, they are just sheeple. They really are just sheeple. And you left them to run around on their own. That's basically what you did. Now, you had people fracture left and right to go into groups, like with Trescue's group, the Grozny went back. Michelson had his group on the ship. That's where a lot of the COG stayed, and a lot of the civilians were also there that worked on like farming and everything and like to go back and forth to the land to get things. And then you had Hoffman's group leap to Anvil Gate for those like mostly citizens. You had a few good gears that went with, but it was mainly civilians that went. Like, you had all of that, but no one was like in charge of everybody anymore. That was gone. Like, you erased that. I had to put it as bad because you pretty much destroyed the only form of society that was left. At the very end of all of this, we have to ask ourselves, was Prescott evil? Was he a bad person? And, you know, I did a lot of research this week about it just to see what I could find. You know, I looked into, like, his character itself. I looked into other people that were analyzing things. I looked into all of this stuff. And the best answer I could come up with for a definitive what's the situation, the best I could think of was, there isn't an answer. Like, it's a situation of where, like, you had someone who had no experience in any of this. Like, he was a deputy to the chairman. That was it. He was, like, basically, like, a mayor's aide. And you put him in charge of an entire nation in the middle of the deadliest war that humanity had ever seen. I'm sorry, but a lot of decisions are going to have to be made. And give it to Prescott. Like, during all of this stuff, he stayed with the people on the mainland. He made all the decisions in a very calculating way to weigh out the factors of pros and cons. Yeah, he made some dumb decisions like the birthing farms, but he had to make a decision. Someone had to. It fell on him. If he has to make a decision that affects the world, he's got to make it. It's not like he can just pretend it's not happening or blame it on someone else. He is in charge. He has to make a decision. And he does. The Hammer of Dawn Strikes was not something he wanted to do. Never did he want to do that. It was an idea he had, and it was like no one else has a better idea. He reached out to other countries, and they did not want to help or anything, thought he was a madman for what he was going to do. But he's like, I don't have another choice. I got nothing. The only people that are willing to help me are the South Islanders, and they're not going to fix any of this. So he did it. And, you know, he doesn't like it. You know, I'd say, what are some other ones he probably doesn't like here? Just looking here. Probably lying to every single person and not being like just a decent politician in a time of non-war. He probably hates having to constantly do it every single day. You know, he probably doesn't like having to hold on to a data disk 24/7 and just having to be like, yeah, I have a secret. I have to carry this around and pretend it's got my mixtape from '87 on it. You know, he probably, what else is on here? Probably didn't want to murder people in general. Like, think about that. Just, I don't even need to bring up how many. He probably just didn't want to kill people. You know, he was someone who worked a desk job, enlisted in the COG, became a deputy chairman, and then was thrown into it. That's how it went. I don't see him as evil. I see him as someone who had to make decisions. I see him as being probably morally unjust to a high degree. Ethically, definitely out the window. But evil is not the correct word for this. If you were to bring up like a D&D, like neutrally neutral, lawfully good, all of that, I don't think he'd fit anywhere on it. Because he doesn't. Like, what are you supposed to say? Lawfully good? Well, the actions he does doesn't really dictate good. Lawfully neutral? Well, he's obviously taking a side here on good or evil in his mind. And then lawfully evil, well, he's doing things for the betterment of humanity to keep humanity alive. I can't put him anywhere. There's nowhere he fits. This is a question of someone's morality, not the question of someone's, like, placement on the definitive ideas of good or evil. Like, that's the best I can say. So, I would say at the end of the day, it's just a very interesting character. Whenever I do his character discussion, I can't wait to do it. It's going to be just me ripping into him 24/7, but it'll be a fun time. But that's really going to do it. So, that's the video on Was Prescott Evil? Not really an answer at all. But at least we looked at all the horrible stuff he did. So I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. And thank the patrons. for making this possible. When we come back, we got Tyrone and Marcella. We got one more video and then the finale to Gabe's convoy. The countdown continues. Love you all to death. Later.